Good evening, Mr. Bond fans, and welcome once again. There are several great things about being a Bond villain when you think about it, really. You get to be as camp and over the top as you'd like, you get to do what you want without considering any moral ramifications, and yeah, sure, you might get killed at the end of the story more often than not, but for a while, as a Bond villain, you can be living your best life, and where better to live your best life than a suitably, ridiculously cool and villainous lair? A good lair can go a long way to solidifying an image of an iconic villain in an audience's head. Some of them can say a lot about their owner's personality and even act as an extension of them to a degree, but more than that, it's just cool to have a personal monorail, isn't it? So today I'll be counting down my top 10 Bond villain lairs, starting as we always do with a dishonourable mention. Which, in this case, belongs to Blofeld, the Spectre oil rig from Diamonds Are Forever. It's such a shame that Blofeld, the villain with some of the coolest layers in the series, ends up with such a nothing base in this film. I mean, I know that budget was a concern on this production, given the astronomical amount of money the filmmakers had to pay Sean Connery to get him to return, so I guess there just wasn't much extra cash lying around to give the exterior of this oil rig a much-needed Ken Adam makeover, but then even the Adam-designed interior sets are pretty lackluster, so maybe this was just always destined to be a write-off. On to my honourable mention now, which goes to Raoul Silva's abandoned island from Skyfall. I really like this base, and especially the story behind it, that Silva was able to make all of the inhabitants leave by causing a panic, and then when they'd all gone, he moved himself in. It's very cool, and I especially love the courtyard outside where Silva and Bond have their little shooting contest with all of the fallen, broken statues. I would really have loved to spend more time in this location, which is why it doesn't quite make the top 10, purely because I don't think we spend enough time there. It's impressive for sure, but I do think there should always be an element to a lair that would kind of make you want to live there. And I wouldn't really want to live on this abandoned island. I mean, it's cool for sure, but it just misses out on making my top 10 list. Starting off the list at 10. Kananga's island lair from Live and Let Die is a severely overlooked base. This villain has control of an entire island. Through the voodoo magic of Baron Samedi, he controls the people, and through his own political might, has the local law enforcement at his beck and call. Oh, and there's great land for growing heroin. But the main cool aspect of the lair, for me at least, are the caves located underneath Samedi's graveyard. This is a visually impressive location. Gets even better when we get to Kananga's main chamber, complete with an office for him, and a shark tank, and, like all good Bond villain bases, a monorail. Admittedly, it's quite a small location, and still missing some extravagance and grandeur, but it's still quite impressive, and you know, who wouldn't want a whole island to themselves? Number 9. Sticking with the subject of villains owning islands, Crab Key takes the number 9 spot on this list. Another beautiful isolated location with a pretty fantastic base stored in its belly. This is the first lair to make it to the screen, so it set the scene and expectations for what to expect in the future, but I still find it pretty amazing that they managed to achieve what they did with the budget they had. The standout rooms are, of course, Dr. No's dining room and the radiation command center room thing, but the dining room in particular is such a cool place. This is actually one of the few Bond sets that I'd like to see more homages to in this current modern era. The glass wall is so well described in the novel that the film version is somewhat disappointing. This is partly down to technical limitations of the time, but also laziness on the filmmaker's part. It was Peter Hunt, the editor, who was the one who eventually kind of stepped in and said, "Hey guys, what are we going to do about this whole fish thing?" And then they just had to kind of cobble it together quite quickly. I heard that on the band Criterion Laserdisc commentary. I think you can find them online. I only heard it for the first time recently, and I was a little bit shocked at how little preparation actually went into an effect like that. But you know, it's still one of the most amazing things in that base.
The glass is convex, 10 inches thick, which accounts for the magnifying effect.
They had to add in the line about the fish being magnified because that was the best bit of footage they could find given the notice they had, but it just smacks of ill preparation. In theory, love it. In practice, not so much, but there is a lot more to enjoy about this setting, which is why it makes it into this top 10. At number 8. I know that most people say that Die Another Day really falls apart when Bond reaches the ice hotel, and I'm inclined to agree, but if narratively the film begins evaporating, that's made up for by this fantastic Peter Lamont set based on actual real-life ice hotels. This is opulent and crazy cool, and I don't intend that as a pun, it's just a really cool set. It's nice that we get to spend a good bit of time here. There's also the adjacent fake diamond mine, which I guess technically qualifies as more of Gustav Graves' lair than the hotel, because he does most of his dastardly deeding in that fake mine, but the hotel is the big showpiece as far as I'm concerned. What's even more amazing is that there's a frigging car chase that takes place inside it. I mean, if a set can double as both a swanky evening party venue and a labyrinth for a Jag and Aston to chase each other around in, that's pretty damn impressive. The Ice Hotel is one of the best things about one of the weaker films in the series and provides some great opulent eye candy. Number 7. Franz Sanchez's Olympiatic Meditation Institute from License to Kill is probably the most underrated lair of the series. Disguised as the headquarters of a religious cult, Sanchez uses the place to manufacture and engineer his, let's say, produce, while Professor Joe Butcher fronts the place's cover along with a lot of followers by the looks of it. It's kind of unusually cynical of a Bond movie to do something like that, but I hate televangelists, so having one as even just a minor Bond villain is A-okay with me.
Bless your heart.
In real life, this location was actually built as a place to celebrate indigenous Mexican culture, and you can kind of tell it's built as some kind of open-air theatre, but it's certainly not some ancient ruins that the crew found. It was actually built in the late 70s, early 80s. The only disappointment is that we don't spend much more time in this place. I wish more of the climax could have taken place here, but then I suppose that would mean having to cut back on or lose some of the tanker chase, which would be unforgivable as that sequence is a real highlight of License to Kill, as is this fantastic villain's lair. Number 6. Stromberg's Atlantis is without a doubt a classic Bond villain's lair. It's huge, fantastical, looks good and sinister, and is complete with Shark Tank. It's a great Ken Adam design, and the aquatic features obviously play well into the villain's plans, but there are a few drawbacks to this lair for me. I know this is gonna seem really nitpicky, and I mean, to be honest, that's what I do, but sometimes the geography of the place, like when I look at the exterior and compare it to an interior, logically, I don't see how that space could exist in that shape, if you know what I mean? Like, how does Bond get on a lift here, and end up here, and then end up, after that, in Stromberg's main dining room area, which is here? And then, that must be the same lift that goes straight to the shark tank, but then how does that lady's hand, when she's fed to the shark earlier on, end up in the aquarium, which is in a separate tank from the shark? I mean, well, you know, whatever, it has a cozy escape pod, and despite some poor back projection, at least a lot of it is better than Dr. No. Is it too much to ask for even a slightly convincing villain's aquarium? Well, regardless of nitpicking, Atlantis is an iconic design and quite rightly regarded as a superior villain's base. At number 5. A severely underrated lair to my mind, the reveal of Trevelyan's GoldenEye satellite dish is grand and impressive. The scale of this thing is amazing, and the control center is a good classic base. Aspects of it feel a little disconnected though. Sometimes I'm not entirely sure if it gels, but I can get over that very easily, and I suppose a part of this can be attributed to the fact that this was a real-life location, the Arecibo Observatory, and while there are of course model shots, there's not much in the way of fantastical flourishes to the exterior. I appreciate that they used a real location for it, and you know, they could have quite easily purely just used models for all of the exterior shots, but much like Sanchez's lair, when you have a real life location that looks as impressive as this, then you might as well use it. And I also really love how it's the base itself that finally kills the villain. Number 4. Francisco Scaramanga doesn't strike me as a let-loose kind of guy, so the juxtaposition of him with his base, which is quite clearly based on an amusement park funhouse, is quite something. It's sort of a cross between a maze and a theme park, and it has a variety of areas, including a Wild West town and abstract art Mirrorland. The rest of the island is very cool too. Beautiful rooms with all the mod cons built into rocks, there's a private beach, and even a Solex agitator-compatible laser machine. It has everything a villain could possibly desire, and if I could live in any Bond villain's lair, this one looks like the most hospitable, but I think I'll do without the murderous manservant. Really though, if Scaramanga got this place on Airbnb, he could probably retire early from the whole assassination thing. At number 3. This is another case of a real-world location being so amazing and fantastic that it's just perfect for a mad, world domination-obsessed, earlobe-lacking villain to utilize. Piz Gloria is one of the best locations in the entire series, and you know what, the production team found the structure, partly constructed and put up the money necessary to complete the building in exchange for using it as a filming location. We spend a good deal of the film here, and while the interiors are classy, they are rather unassuming, but of course Blofeld has his dastardly base and laboratory built into the mountain beneath the exterior structure, which is appropriately menacing, and much like Scaramanga's funhouse, I love it when a base is actually built into something and retains something of the natural location. Outside of the movie, I love that the location retained the name of Piz Gloria and is now a revolving restaurant, so the fact that you can visit this place and dine there is pretty awesome, though I assume they have a more varied menu than just, like, chicken and whatever that is. Number 2. Ken Adam wins out again with his awesome take on a space station. I've seen a lot of great sci-fi movies, but I've never seen a space station on screen more exciting and fun than this one. It's very unrealistic, of course, but then that's Bond. It's just such a great, eclectic design. I'm not sure that a lot of it makes sense, and there is something quite grotesque and ugly about it, with all the pods and tunnels and whatnot. It gives it the feeling of a base that's been built up over time, like they just started with one ball and then, oh, we need another ball, actually we're bringing a couple dozen more people to live here. And there's no symmetry about it, but that's what I kinda love the most about it. Something that was completely removed from the lackluster redesign when the base appeared in 007 Legends. Anyway, the interiors do away with any sense of realism, not that the movie necessarily has much of that anyway, but it doesn't matter, it looks fantastic, so much detail, and the fact that they managed to have so much wire work and action in this thing is super impressive. The fact that the base is actually located up in space gives the whole ending of Moonraker some nice extra stakiness. The hero needn't just worry about being inside the thing when it inevitably explodes, but also the danger of being sucked out into the void of space, like poor old Drax. Shout out also to Drax's amazing Aztec temple base down on Earth. The control room is so glorious with all the geometric shaped projections and Drax's awesome command chair. It's a wonderful lair, as is the space station of course, but there's just one more iconic set from Ken Adam that beats it. Number 1. Of course, how could number 1 be anything other than the You Only Live Twice volcano lair? Much like the inevitability of the DB5 forever being Bond's best vehicle, this will always be the best baddie base. A huge part of why this is so great is because of all of the amazing features. There's a launch pad for rockets and helicopters, command center, prison zone for locking up enemies, a swanky apartment area complete with ferocious animals ready to chow down on inadequate underlings, it's built into a frigging volcano, and there's even a monorail. But outside of the base's existence within the Bond movie universe, just the very fact that this set existed is truly something amazing. It cost $1 million to make, was 45 meters high, and could be seen from miles around. The only bad thing about this is that it isn't still currently standing. They had so many people visiting the set during the movie's production. I swear, if this thing was still standing today, it would be a huge tourist attraction. Hey, I'd pay theme park admission prices to just get one ride on that monorail. I always really took this set for granted when I was a kid. I mean, just up until a few years ago, really. Like, Bond is so big and extravagant that you kind of get used to the larger-than-life aspects, but the past couple of times I've watched You Only Live Twice, I can't help but just marvel at this magnificent realization of a completely outlandish and imaginative dream. It's a glorious structure that I just don't think we'll ever see realized for real on film again. It's one of the most iconic sets in the history of cinema, and a perfect lair for Bond's arch nemesis. And that's why it's my number 1 Bond villain's lair. But as always, I'd really love to hear from you guys. If there was anything that I missed, anything that's so obviously deserving of being on a top 10 list, then please let me know in the comments below. And until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.